Okay, I think we're back in business.
You have to start all over.
If they couldn't be here in person or online.
Oh, shoot, didn't. Oh, nice. Last time I gave you the option to select that screen. Is there anybody on?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
I have a few people online as well.
Yeah. If I do that, then how do I get back to Zoom? That was the issue. Oh, mark to the rest. Maybe try closing this and reopening the share option. There we go. Back. We are so back. All right. Okay, guys, thanks for your patience. So we left off on this slide. The first few slides I think are pretty self-explanatory, but if you didn't hear the audio out there and you've got questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll have my email and phone number on here at the end. But getting back to, so what this grant actually is our FIRWORM grant. That's where our funding is coming from to do the 50% cost share with each landowner and HOA. So the FIRWORM is Forest Restoration and Wildfire Risk Mitigation. This program was created in 2017, and it basically combined two different programs that we already had, which was the Forest Restoration Program and the Wildfire Risk Reduction Grant Program. So they kind of combined together, and then the Colorado State Forest Service started managing it. So this is state funding. I just want to throw out there, in the times that we're in, you don't need to be worried about the stability of this grant funding. None of it is federal. It's 100% state, so it's already earmarked and good to go. There's no risk of, the project being stalled or put on hold, or any funding disappearing. So that's some questions I've been getting with current projects we've got around the state. And then our grant application was successful, like we said. So the last time we all met, we were in the middle of getting that application, written and submitted. So we found out this winter that we did get awarded. This is, like Kara said, the first time Alberta County's gotten awarded a grant, so we were super excited. It's 50% cost share, which means that 50% of what you all pay for this work will be reimbursed to you through this grant funding. And if you want to click to the next slide. So the community HOAs and landowners are going to be entering, and this is kind of our next steps in the process in terms of how the grant and the cost share works. You'd be entering into a service agreement for the Colorado State Forest Service, assistance in administering the grant. And then, like we said, the fire department is going to be the fiscal agent, which means that once we submit reimbursements and they get processed, a check would come to the fire department, and then they'd be working with us to track and manage how much, each landowner is needing a check for, and we would distribute the payments that way. So the grant funding comes with a scope of work requirement. So we kind of tend to do this when we do these community-wide projects, just for fear of them turning into more of like landscaping type of projects. And that's what we want to avoid. We want to make sure we're doing good forestry and actual treatment. So one of the hard requirements that we're setting is 1 acre being treated at the minimum on the property. Of course, there could be some exceptions if you do have some dense areas on your land, but maybe you don't have a full acre of land. We could work around that as long as we're doing, actual work, and it's not just, prune my tree and I would like to keep every damn oak that I have. We want to avoid that. But treatments would occur on some of the community common areas as well. I think we had 9 different parcels or tracts that were included in this grant application that are HOA common areas. And those are spread out between the neighborhoods. We've been keeping track of those. We've got those mapped out and ready to go. So in that case, the HIZ would be performed more so with the HOA, maybe a member of the HOA. And anybody who's got a lot that's participating that's adjacent to one of those common area spaces, you would be we would communicate that with you, that there's going to be work taking place on that parcel next to your property as well. So it is, like I said, 50% cost share. So you will be reimbursed 50% of the total cost for the fuels mitigation and defensible space work. So how this works is that you're going to have a contractor performing work on your property. This is going to be something that's pre-identified. And I'll go over kind of next steps in the next slide, but don't click yet. But basically, once we identify the treatment that we're gonna be doing on your property, we develop that with you, the landowner, so that we're meeting your goals and we're also meeting the goals of the grant. Once we get that developed, we'd have a contractor come, they'll be giving you an individualized estimate for the work on your property, so giving you a total cost. And if you decide that you do want to move forward with that project work, comfortable with the cost, knowing the reimbursement you'll get back, then what would happen is they would do the work on your property, they would invoice you, you would pay that full invoice up front. And then once we are notified that that invoice has been paid, we submit for reimbursement. And then after about 30, sometimes to 40 days, you would be getting that money back. So just want to make it aware, it's not an upfront 50% match.
So does the contractor handle all the paperwork and does all that for us on our behalf?
In terms of like the invoicing,
Uh-huh.
yeah, so they would, well, we're all kind of in the loop, so they would not start operating on your property until we come and give them the okay. We'd also be stopping by while they're doing the work, just to check in and make sure they're, you know, doing everything that we've agreed upon. And then they're not gonna invoice the landowner until we, the project administrators, do a final closeout. So we would walk it, you know, with the landowner, with the contractor, make sure everything was completed. And then the contractor would be sending you all an invoice, likely by email, and they include us on those emails. So we can see that the invoice has been sent, and I think they usually put a 14-day mark on that. Most of the contractors we work with usually would like payment within the 2 weeks. And then after that gets paid, then they immediately notify us via email. And that's how we compile a list of landowners or recipients to include in the reimbursement package. So they are sort of handling their own invoicing, since it's their, you know, business, and it's a contract with both the contractor and us to be allowed to do the project administration. But Mark and myself would be involved in every step of that as well.
Question.
Yes, of course.
What is scope of work requirements?
Yeah, so the scope of work, that's something that we would develop sort of just in general for this project. And that's gonna be setting just basic goals and objectives, such as we're wanting to hit a basal area, which is that density, maybe of, you know, 70 square feet per acre. Which would mean that we're gonna take out, you know, all the trees that are maybe less than 6 inches in diameter, so all those really small trees, we would remove them all. It would also include the objective of removing all ladder fuels. So that was kind of in that photo where we pointed out like gamble shrubs or really tall grasses growing right underneath the crowns of trees. We would be removing that from underneath the tree completely, up to about a 10-foot buffer around the tree's crown, just to reduce the risk of fire through ladder fuels. Some of our other requirements in our scope of work are usually proper crown spacing. So we like to see, for ponderosa pines, they occur in clumps naturally, that's how they grow. So we tend to keep about between 3 to 5 trees per clump. And between those trees, ideally like 10 feet of spacing. And then between the clumps that we retain, we like to have 25 to 30 feet of spacing. And that's just to basically expand upon natural openings in the crown. So areas where you look up and, you know, you don't see any needles or any leaves touching, we want to expand on those. And that's to basically mitigate the fire in the sense of, if the fire were to reach the tops of the trees, as it's sweeping through, once it hits a pocket where there's no crown to continue to, it's forced to drop back down to the surface. And if we've properly mitigated all the ladder fuels, then theoretically it shouldn't be able to as easily get back into the crowns. So it's really meant to open up the spacing of the crown or the needles so that, you know, fire is just not moving through as easily, is sort of the goal. But these requirements are usually pretty generalized. Oh, yeah.
I have a question here, and it says, do we have to use certain pre-approved contractors?
Yes, so that is something that we'll get to for sure. But yes, the way that these cost share, you know, grant projects work, as we'll be having and this is actually on, I think, the next slide. So maybe let's go ahead and click to that one. But let me see, let me make sure it's on here. No, this is sort of just describing, we can talk about this for a moment. This is just describing the areas we'd be working in. So our main treatment areas, like we said, are gonna be individual landowner lots, so your properties. But there's also going to be, some HOA common areas that are included as well. And so our priority is gonna be for treatment, with landowners that already expressed interest the first go around that we did informational meetings. So a lot of you guys are here are already on that list. Or if you received my email about this meeting, then you're already on that list. Those are the landowners that we're prioritizing with our budget, because we submitted the grant application with a certain acreage target in mind, and then received funding for that acreage amount. So I think we're just at about 331 acres. And so just making sure we spread that between the landowners that expressed interest. And then in some of these neighborhoods, like we said, we will focus on common areas. I don't think they're that large. I think that a good portion of them are, less than 20 acres in size. So nothing too major, but like I said, if they are adjacent to any of your properties, you would be notified of that we'd be doing work on there. And then I think this next slide should discuss contractors, or this may.
I can answer the question about the contractors.
Yeah, sure, if you wanna go ahead and answer it.
Yeah, so we send out invitations to come see these properties so that they can develop a high and low bid. And from those bids, we usually select the lowest one, but sometimes we'll pick the most equipped for the project. So we make sure that the contractors that we select have the ability to carry out the contract, they have the right equipment and experience. And that we get a competitive bid. So we want to get the best value for everybody too, we don't want to overspend on these grants,
We
so.
can't, yeah.
Yeah, we can't overspend.
You're out of funding, you're out of
Actually,
funding, yeah.
So we wanna get as much done for the best price with the best work possible, so that's why we go through our own contractor list. I understand that some people have their own contractors and they're welcome to come contact us and we can add them to this invite so that they can bid on the project. And we may even use multiple contractors or subcontractors if there's specialized work. So for example, a lot of these treatments are gonna occur near homes, so we may need arborists to safely remove those. Near structure trees or near power lines or steep slopes, so. That's kind of why we use our own contractors.
Yeah, and so the way that would work is once we get a good portion of these lots, laid out after we've done the HIC assessments with you all. And I'll kind of get to that shortly, but after the layout is when we schedule that site visit with our contractors. So like Mark said, we send out an email invitation to a bunch of different contractors. It is mandatory if they're planning to bid on the project that they must attend that site visit. It's something that we call a contractor show me. And what we do is we take them around, we'll probably in this case, take them to all the different communities. And within those communities, we select lots that range from very easy work, not a whole lot to do on the lot, to medium to hard. And that's how they develop that low and high range bid. They say, oh, this property is very easy, this is the lowest, I would do the work for. This one's pretty hard, this is the highest cost I would do it per acre. And once they give us that quote range, if they do get awarded the project, when they start crafting the individual bids for your lots, they are not allowed to surpass that high end cost that they gave us in their project proposal. And then like Mark said, we do sometimes pick the lowest bid, but not always, because sometimes somebody's bidding low because they want to win the project, but they don't have the proper equipment, don't have the capacity. And this is such a large scale project that we definitely want to work with a contractor that's got some experience. We have a few, contractors around these counties that we do a lot of work with. So I do believe that they'd be attending these site visits, but like Mark said, if you've got a newer contractor that maybe doesn't have as much exposure, but is looking for some experience, they're welcome to reach out to us so that they can get on that email list from us.
And I just wanted to say that, Spencer, at the Colorado Forest Office has already gotten contract people know that Albert County received this bid.
Yes.
And so they're starting to come out of the woodworks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for everybody to know that, you know, they wanna make sure the contractors can do the right work on the property, and it's really important that the Colorado State Forest Service is kind of leading that charge. There's a lot of kind of day by people that said, oh, I can cut down that tree, but is that really what is needed, or how are they gonna cut it down, and where is it gonna fall? And so, what Spencer has done is given everybody who has contacted him the ability to come to these meetings and be able to be there, so it's not like they're pruning out exactly who they want. Anybody can do it, but I do believe that it's a good option so that we know that the properties are getting maintained well.
Yeah, so that will be our responsibility on our office to handle any kind of coordination with contractors. Nobody should be going like out on their own to contact a contractor, have work done and expect a reimbursement. With the grant share programs, we do have to follow a certain process, and that does come down to just like state regulations, you know, that we're held to, and just regulations from the funding sources that we're getting this from.
Okay.
Okay, and then I did want to say, you know, after that mandatory show me site visit, where we invite the contractors to come out, see the project, get a feel for the type of work that would be happening. We expect project proposals or their bid proposals back to us within a 2-week period. After we receive those, you know, bid proposals back from the contractors, we would get with the fire department and we would go through those different bids and kind of decide as a team all together, you know, what contractor makes the most sense. Like Mark said, we might have multiple, and that's something that our boss Spencer has told us. It is such a large scale project, and because it is spread across multiple neighborhoods, which we've never really had before, it may be more efficient timeline wise as well to have multiple contractors working. So we'll just have to see, it's not set in stone, we may just have one, but that's something we'll decide later down the road. We are planning to hopefully get this bid out by the summertime. So late summer is kind of our current goal. And then coming back to the presentation slide, so interested landowners, you would receive, and this is kind of what I mentioned, a home and property assessment by our office, so it would be Mark and I. And some of you have already had it. So anyone that's already had it in that first go around for the educational purposes and just gathering interest in the neighborhoods, there's no need to have another one. You guys are good to go. And so as long as you still have your notes, or if you need another copy of those HIZ notes, we've got them all stored. If you have not had an HIZ assessment yet, that is something that would need to get scheduled. That is something that costs $93, just a one-time $93 fee. For the HIZ, that's to cover our staff's time for coming out and performing that. During that HIZ assessment, for efficiency's sake, we usually start to design a treatment plan with the landowner as well. So this is kind of where we talk about like what your goals are, right? What you would be comfortable with us flagging or taking, making sure that everybody's on the same page as far as we think this should be removed, you know, are you comfortable with that? And then just kind of making sure that we're accomplishing all the goals in our scope of work that we mentioned. And then we're also accomplishing the landowner goals as well. Because we're not looking to like take away all your privacy screening or, you know, just like clear cut your property or anything like that. And so we'll be developing that together. That's where the $93 assessment fee comes from. If you do decide after, you know, so after the HIZ assessment, we come back to do that project layout, which is where some of you have already had it performed, where we flag or we paint trees for removal. We lay out a property boundary or a treatment boundary if you just decide to treat like portions of your property. And so after we do that layout, that's when we have enough layouts completed, we would have the contractor site visit. And so that way, when the contractor comes back that's been awarded to look at individual lots, they can see the exact treatment area. They say, oh, here's the boundary flagging. This is the trees that are marked for removal. We know just about the work that's, you know, gonna need to happen here. And they develop an individualized cost for your treatment on your property. And that's the cost that, like I said, stays within that quote range that they gave us in their project proposal. It cannot surpass that or go any higher. So if they see a property, if they're like, oh man, it's harder than I thought, like, well, you know, that's tough, like you gave us your highest cost, so they're held to that. And if you do decide that you're comfortable with their bid estimate that they send you, they give you about 2 weeks to review that bid estimate and service agreement. And if you're comfortable with that and you've gotten all your questions answered, you decide to move forward with the project, then you would sign that service agreement and you would pay a one-time $372 fee, and that's the Colorado State Forest Service office. And that's payment for our time basically coming out, doing the boundary layout, doing the tree marking, and then coming back out multiple times while the work is happening. So it's basically just our staff time. I do want to make mention that the $93 assessment fee and the $372 project admin fee are not included in the reimbursement portion. So those are one-time non-reimbursable payments because they're to our office, just for our staff time. But any price or, you know, cost in the invoice from the contractor is reimbursable, and you will get 50% of that total cost back. And so once all the assessments have been completed, then those wishing to continue, like I said, will have their property and treatment boundaries flagged and marked, and then that is in the preparation for that site visit. All right, and then this was our contractor page that I couldn't remember where it was, buried in this presentation. Oh no, you can go back to it, just in case I missed anything. So like we said, invitations will be sent out to all interested contractors. That's where we mentioned, if you do have a contractor that you know of that's interested, give them our contact information so that we can make sure to get them on our contractor list. They'll be shown the different areas. I kind of explained the breakdown, and they'll be shown easy, medium, and hard property across the neighborhoods, just so that they have a good idea of the entire project. Once the bids have been received, in some cases, we may have HOA presidents come in with us as well. It's not always mandatory, but if the HOA wants to be included in that conversation, it's definitely okay with us, and we would get together with the HOAs and the fire department, and then that's where we, like we said, go through all the bid proposals that we received and decide which contractor to go with. This is where I mentioned the lowest cost bid is not always the best. It might look great on paper, but they might butcher the work that's gonna be done. So we don't always go with the lowest cost bid. If we don't, there's gonna be good reason. And if you ever have questions or anything like that, feel free to ask us. The HOAs would all receive a copy of that contractor's bid proposal. In that proposal, they basically provide us with a plan of operations. So this is the equipment I plan to use. I know I have to do this type of tree removal. That's where we decide if there's trees near the home, they may have to subcontract an arborist to do that. So they'll mention any kind of subcontractors in their bid proposal. And then they'll also break down their cost range as well and kind of give explanation as to why. So every HOA, like I mentioned, will have a copy of the bid proposal of the contractor that we decide to go with. And then once the selection's been made, we'll notify the contractor, and then that's when we'll start bringing them to your lots that have already been laid out for treatment. And that's when they'll start developing those bids for each landowner. And that's something that the contractor themselves will send your way via email, that bid estimate that they put together, with a service agreement attached. Our office actually creates the service agreements. It's got a lot of legal information in it from CSU, but it's basically just kind of trying to hold the contractor's feet to the fire, you know, making sure they have the proper liability insurance, making sure that they're gonna complete this and they're not gonna just bail on the project, you know. It also has payment terms listed within it, so your total bid amount from the contractor would be listed in that service agreement with terms of payment. In some cases, maybe for some of the HOA common areas that are much larger, if it makes more sense fiscally to break that into increments and get reimbursed as we go, like maybe in 5 or 10 acre increments, that's something that we can do, because it can get costly if you have a 20 or 30 acre treatment happening. To just pay it all in one lump sum can be a lot. So that's something that we can work with landowners and HOAs, you know, with if it becomes an issue or if it's a larger scale treatment. But for the most part, how it usually works is they invoice you, you pay that total in full, and then we submit the reimbursement paperwork to get that money back to you. And then, like I mentioned, I already talked about this, but that $372 fee would be paid to us at the time of the service agreement signing. So if you review your bid estimate from the contractor, you're comfortable with it, you're comfortable with the service agreement, once you sign that service agreement, is when you would send that project admin fee into our office. And that, like I said, is just for our time to come out there, manage the project, and all the layout that we would have done prior as well.
I have a question.
Yes, of course.
On the contractor, do they detail out the work that they do with the cost, like for their equipment, this would be what it's cost? Or do they bill by day, or they bill by
So,
acre?
They do, they usually bill by acre, that's a great question. A lot of contractors, when they develop their cost ranges, they are factoring those things in, internally. So like cost of diesel, the cost of their equipment payments, cost of paying their staff, time that they're spending on this project versus a different one. They kind of factor all of that in, and they have a formula that they use to basically build a cost per acre. So it would be laid out per acre, and you would have an exact dollar figure, so you would know, okay, it's gonna be X amount per acre. I know I'm doing this many acres of treatment on my property, and they'll include that in their bid estimate for you. They would also include in that bid estimate the exact equipment that they're gonna be using, as well as just kind of their objectives. So like tree removals, any kind of pruning, if they're gonna subcontract an arborist to do hazard tree removals near the home, all of that would be detailed in that bid.
So in some way, they'll kind of detail what they're going to do.
Yeah,
And then a 1 acre cost that was.
Yeah, yep, so they'll have that per acre cost, and they will kind of itemize it for you. But it's not super itemized, but they could break it down further for sure, if you had questions about how they came, to that cost, or, where it fell within their, cost range that they gave us, because like we said, they have a low end cost, and then it ranges up to the highest end cost, and they kind of decide, and what they take into consideration is, usually terrain, or, if you do have hazard tree removal right beside your home, that's something that can be kind of costly with an arborist, so that would, change the cost of the bid, depending on if they're gonna subcontract that out or if they can do it themselves. But yeah, they will let you know like where you fell, and kind of detail why they came to that cost.
And so when the Forest Service is doing the bid, excuse my voice.
No, you're okay.
But reviewing the detail that's sent into with their bid to you.
Yeah.
You would basically, if you had a question, would be asking the contractor a question
Absolutely.
and make sure that
Mhm.
what they come up with makes.
Yes, and that's why we'll review it with our boss Spencer. He's been doing this for nearly 20 years. And, contractors will get overly confident sometimes, right? They think that I'm just gonna go all in, I'm gonna give a high bid, and we know when we're getting not ripped off, that's a callous way to say it, but we know when a price is not fair. And so we push back on the contractors, and if they're giving us a higher cost than we think is necessary for the terrain and the type of work, then we ask for a very detailed explanation, and if it's not acceptable, then they need to adjust their bid.
That's part of the 372 fee that we're paying.
Yes, for us to do that behind the scenes type of work, yeah.
I have a question too, just
Yes.
clean up, and I mean all the little pieces of wood and the hauling it off and
Yeah, so
everything, so your place looks perfect, you don't have to clean it up afterwards.
So in terms of perfect, we are gonna be doing mastication on this project because it is very flat terrain. So it's very easily accessible with masticators. So that's kind of like mechanical thinning where they'll basically fell the tree and then they kind of run over it with a masticator, which is a skid steer with like almost a cylindrical column on the front that has teeth on it and it rotates. It kind of just chews the trees up, and it leaves basically this chip and chunk finish on the forest floor. It will for about a year look like that chip and chunk finish, almost like wood mulch kind of, yeah.
So you wanna keep that on the ground.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I would recommend leaving it. It has a lot of benefits. So it actually helps your soil to retain water. because it doesn't evaporate off as quickly. It also helps with erosion if we do have any kind of flooding events. And it actually allows for like more nutrients to stay in the soil, so you end up getting native grasses and wildflowers or like perennials, kind of forbs just popping back up after about a year. And the animals really like it. If you have wildlife in your neighborhood, whenever we do a mastication project, you see deer and elk are just hanging out.
But the bigger pieces, the full logs are gonna get removed.
Yes,
Yeah.
they'll be hauled off.
And anything left, that chip depth has to be like less than 4 inches, is it?
Yeah, between 3 and 4 inches.
So you're not
ideally
gonna have
2 or
big
3.
piles of it.
Okay.
No,
Just
it'll all
for-
be, yeah,
Branches.
no,
Yeah,
it'll be
branches
evenly
should be broken
distributed.
up.
The chunks can be really big though.
They can be large, about the size of this coffee
Yeah.
cup, you know.
So I have a file I had masticated 20 years ago. Still there.
Still breaks down, yeah.
Is
Exactly.
that a good pile, lady?
Yeah, it can definitely take a while, that's why, we do require like such minimal chip depth, cause it does break down quicker if it's in that smaller depth, and then, you know, it kind of depends on precipitation, I'd say as well. If you get a lot of snow, that snowpack can help break it down quicker. But yeah, you can still see remnants of it. It basically has to do with how well that site regenerates, which is when you get those native grasses and forbs coming back, you don't notice it as much, because, you know, those grasses are growing. If it's an area where you were already like pretty barren of grass, you know, it may not.
That's what I have.
Okay, yeah. It may not, come back as well. But that's definitely something that, you know, we could discuss with the contractor, if maybe you decide like you wanna stick to a certain diameter class so that they have to be hauled off instead of masticated to avoid any kind of mastication, that could be an option. That we could do to kind of work around it, but in most cases, we do recommend mastication, because like I said, it does have good benefits. It's very effective and it's very quick, you know, and it's gonna be, cost effective as well, so.
Yeah, if you did have a bar come through that area, it would slow the bar down if it's burning, because it will burn too.
It will burn, but I will say it's a common misconception that like dead downed trees or dead woody debris on the ground is more flammable. It's actually the trees with the green needles that, live trees are more flammable, than those kind of dead downed ones on the forest floor. So although it is flammable, it's less of a risk, I'd say, than like your healthy trees that are left, in terms of wildfire events. It's not necessarily going to slow it, but the more openings we create and the less, you know, fuels we have on the surface. Kara was just telling me they've had a lot of brush fires happening out in the county in the last few days. So those grasses, you know, contribute to, different fuel types. They burn really quickly and, can spread very quickly, but they don't burn for long. But still, they can spread it to trees. So, you know, with the mastication, you're also ridding the site of, you know, those fuels for the meantime, and that would reduce the fire risk as well.
Well, that's good information, because that's the question we get from our homeowners.
Oh,
when They
yes.
go by and they
Sure.
see,
Mhm.
and they're like, well, that's gonna burn just like everything else.
Yeah, it is a common misconception, you know.
Like after a year or so, like the wood does start to break down a little bit or enough that like dirt is kind of mixed in with it and it's holding moisture against the soil. So it doesn't readily ignite without almost a crown fire, basically. It's pretty hard to get that going.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Does that mean that you won't be doing anything with already downed trees? You're only, this only covers live trees?
It will depend on the diameter, so if they're, yeah, if they're like, if the trunk is like 8 inches or less in diameter, then they could masticate that. If it's like a really large tree, then they would likely just leave it. We don't usually include in our scope of work, like processing or hauling those off. If it's something that you would desire on your property, then it's something that we could definitely ask the contractor for, and they would just work that into your bid. I'm sure that they would be willing to, you know, haul it off. I mean, oftentimes when we require our contractors to haul wood off-site, they have like a buyer lined up or a mill that they're gonna take it to, so it probably wouldn't hurt, you know? I know one of our contractors even like does DIY like modular cabins with some of the logs that he takes off project sites, because our timber market is so sparse in this area along the Front Range. Log mills don't even wanna buy it. It's not very merchantable, so they find creative ways to use it. So I'm sure that they would be fine to haul that off if you have a few like larger trees that are already down. At the least, I feel like they would limit and then bucket up into smaller pieces.
It depends on the size, if it's already rotted and it's been down for a while, they might be able to get it with the masticator and just kind of break it up and spread it out. That's usually what they do with the smaller stuff, but if it's a massive tree
Like
that
a
they
massive,
can't break
yeah.
it down, then they might have to charge to haul it off.
And that's something that would be included in that bid, and that we would kind of talk about during that assessment, when we would do the walkthrough of the property and develop the treatment plan. And then, I think we're good on this slide. Okay, so, once we get, the contractor in place, we've started getting individualized bids sent out to landowners. You're comfortable, you've signed the service agreement, and it's full speed ahead, then the project work would begin. This would likely, okay, I'm not gonna overpromise, I always do this. We're hoping that by like the fall, maybe beginning of winter, so this kind of equipment can even run during the winter, and especially on flat terrain like this, so it would be fine for them to operate in the winter. So they hopefully would be starting the work this winter. We do have a couple of years on the grant to get all the money spent, so it's not like we're in a super time crunch right now. But our goal is to get all the layout done by this summer, get the project bid out and awarded by late summer, early fall, and then potentially have work starting, late fall, early winter timeframe wise. So the project will proceed in methodical order. With treatments occurring on properties within the same areas, then moving throughout the communities. So they're not gonna start on this house and then go way to the other side of the community to do a different house. They usually just move through the community, in, a fashion that kind of makes sense to them. If, of course, one, property is maybe not ready yet or something, then they may kind of bounce around. But I've found that in community-wide projects like this, they do usually just kind of start on one end and move through, like that. And then, as I mentioned, CSFS staff, so that's gonna be Mark and myself, will be overseeing and inspecting all the work that's being completed. So if a contractor's on your property, it's never just gonna be the contractor, on your property the whole time. Like, we will be out there at least 2 or 3 times, to check on the status of the work. And that's basically to just kind of connect with you guys, make sure you're liking how it's looking so far, it's going how you thought, and then connecting with the contractor, making sure that they've not run into anything that's, odd or wasn't included in scope, or don't have any kind of questions for us. And, like I said, they're not allowed to invoice you, until we perform a closeout inspection. So, that's just basically to ensure that they met all the specs in our scope of work, in our contract that we created with them. And to make sure that, there's no last minute things you guys wanna do, oh, I decided I do want this tree taken, things like that, so just making sure everybody's comfortable on the same page. And then once we do that closeout, they would go ahead and probably invoice you within a few days, if maybe up to a week. Then they usually, like I said, give that 2-week period to get that invoice paid to them. And then, yeah, as mentioned, once we approve the work, that's when they'll invoice you, and then, like I said, once they receive payment from you guys, what they do is send us, oh, yes, sorry.
Should we be the ones that are marking somehow, and how would that be to mark, areas like, your, septic system and all the
Okay,
rest
yeah.
of that, there's things in the ground that we want to make sure.
Yeah, so definitely, when we do that, HIZ assessment, we'll kind of discuss that with you, so that when we come back to do that, treatment layout, we'll kind of identify that on our maps. And that way, when we bring the contractor to walk the treatment layout, they'll know. And we usually encourage the landowners to be with us, during that contractor walkthrough for the bid. That way you can chat with the contractor, build that rapport, and you're also getting any kind of questions to them and things like that. Identify where your leach field is, or, septic systems, areas you want them to avoid. They'll usually not get near, those leach fields, just because they don't wanna injure your septic system in any way, and that heavy equipment can definitely compromise those. So that is something that, yes, we will identify with you.
So it's all, that's taken care of during the assessment.
Yep, and we'll make sure that it's flagged off, they'll know exactly where not to go. Yep.
What subdivision is your expected starting point?
That's a good question. You know, in terms of actual work, I'm not sure yet. It's gonna depend on if we get 1 or 2 contractors in place. And we might be able to start on multiple communities at the same time if we do that. In terms of assessments, and moving forward with just the immediate next steps of getting those assessments scheduled with everybody, and kind of developing treatments, we're gonna be starting with Bonnie Ridge, I think, and then progressing into Gamble Oaks, and then progressing to Saddlewood, and finishing up in the Pines. And then we've got Gold Creek, just like a common area there that we'll go visit as well. And then I'll be in touch with the HOA presidents, or any contact I was given from the HOA to make sure that we're also visiting those common areas in the neighborhoods also. But we actually, even though it sounds like spreading it out a lot, we're actually pretty speedy with these assessments. They usually last about an hour. We try to fit about 8 of them into a day. So it will actually move relatively quick. We plan to knock these assessments out over the next month and a half. So at the end of the meeting tonight, we've got a sign-up sheet for dates and time slots on those dates, where you can sign up according to your neighborhood. And we'll be visiting those neighborhoods on certain days. And that's just to basically make sure that Mark and myself are not like going to a house in Bonnie Ridge, driving over to a house in Gamble Oaks, then going to Saddlewood. We're trying to just kind of localize it and move through each community. Like I mentioned too, if you've already had the HIC assessment, then you're good to go. We'll just come out, you know, before the contractor show me, make sure everything is still marked, see if we need to mark anything else for you guys, or add anything on, and then we would move forward with that. But anyone who has not had the HIC assessment yet, there is that fee associated and the scheduling that would need to be done. And we are hoping to get those scheduled starting as early as next week, if possible. And so we did bring a sign-up sheet. We'll pass that around at the end. Oh, this we already sort of went over. I will reiterate just upfront, I like to really hit on this part, because I have had some people be confused, or even some counties be confused and think they're gonna be given, you know, the reimbursement money up front. And then use that to pay for the work. And unfortunately, it does not work that way. I wish it did, that would be really stellar. But the way that it works is, like I said, we'll pay the full cost up front. And then we will submit a reimbursement package to basically our state office in Fort Collins. They handle all of our grant accounts, which is where that funding is stored. And so once we send that reimbursement package to Fort Collins, our program managers and grant specialists check it over, which usually takes about a week. Then that'll trigger the reimbursement being distributed. That check will arrive to the fire department since they're acting as our fiscal agent, basically our middleman. And then they'll have a list of people with the reimbursement package, because we'll be giving you guys a copy of that as well. And that way they can, you know, confirm the cost of the check that they got, and they can distribute individualized checks to landowners. So do expect to be out of pocket of that total cost for treatment for about between 30 and 45 days is how long it can take to get the reimbursement back. So we just like everybody to know that, just so that you're not getting hit, you know, with like an unexpected expense and thinking it's like a week-long turnaround. I wish that would be great, but we work for the state government, unfortunately, so.
But you need to have at least 5 to 10 invoices paid, so. You've got
Yeah.
homeowners, they're slow payers, that affects other people.
Well, there is a timeline restriction on when payment needs to be received. At the most, they'll give you 2 weeks, and that's in business days, to get that paid. A lot of times, if you haven't paid within a week, that contractor starts not knocking on your door literally, but you know, reaching out vigorously to get their payment. And so we do like to wait to have like a few people to submit on a reimbursement packet, because we like to reduce the amount of paperwork to our state office. And that sounds like it would take forever, but in the reality, given the size of you guys' lots, these contractors will likely finish work on your properties within less than a week. I would say.
Like 1 to 2 days.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just gonna be a
pretty
few
quickly.
days, they'll immediately move on to the next property. So, you know, they might knock out like 5 properties within like,
Yeah, this could be like a week of work for a contractor
Yeah.
or 2
Yeah.
contractors.
And
If it's
so-
2, then even faster.
yeah, so potentially like once a week or so, we're submitting a reimbursement package to our state office. And then, you know, we try to keep things moving smoothly. If it's like a dire situation or an immediate thing, for a landowner, you know, falling into some hard times, you're like, I cannot wait this long, you know, for the reimbursement to be submitted. Definitely just communicate with us, you know, it's as simple, yeah, it's as simple as us just filling out a packet and sending it to our state office. If they wanna complain that there's not enough people on it, then they can complain to me. I've been here for over 5 years and I can take it. But yeah, we can submit with less than that many landowners if we need to, or if it is moving slower than we had hoped. And that, like I said, will just be an open line of communication, between us and the landowners, so just making sure that everybody's in a good spot. But we usually try to do that, just ideally to kind of maximize our flow of paperwork at the state office.
What if you are not available to be in person for the assessment?
That's okay, you don't necessarily have to be, because we do the assessment as we go through, and some of you know this, because we did them with you. But we go through, a form, and basically we are taking vigorous notes while we're out there on your structure itself, home hardening tips. You know, ideally, if you can't be present for the HIZ assessment, or there's not a date anytime soon that's gonna work for that, then we would probably go out there. We would develop a treatment plan and then basically submit that treatment plan to the landowner for review, make sure they're comfortable with it. Which might just kind of, in that case, require like some GIS mapping, so that they can see exactly on the property, where we're, you know, thinking of doing the work, if they weren't able to walk it with us. And so, you know, that's kind of how that would go. But ideally, they could pick a date, you know, sometime in the next few weeks that might work for them to be available. But I do understand, you know, people work, and we unfortunately work 4/10s usually just to maximize our field season. So we were working Monday through Thursday. We usually will start our first HIZ assessment on those days at 8 a.m. And then kind of move throughout the day from there. I think, you know, the latest we wanna leave the community is probably like 4, just to get back to the office in time, to get ready to go home, but ideally they would be there. If not, we can work with them and try to figure out what they would be the most comfortable with. But either way, if you're there or not, you're gonna get some HIZ notes sent over to you, after that assessment, so that you can see everything that we discussed and talked about. And then we have a printed out map from the county assessor's office, so just like parcel data. And actually Mark put in a lot of blood, sweat and tears on the mapping, we're actually all ready to go already. And so we would kind of use those to notate and show you guys as we're walking through, like, okay, well, this tree we're talking about taking, here's where it is on your map, you know, and here's where it is in proximity to your home. And we use that to basically then develop our GIS treatment polygons.
What's the total amount of the grant?
It is,
Because,
it's
the
over,
project budget was about 1.8 million, I believe.
yeah,
And for the 50% match, that comes out to about 582,000.
yeah, it was $582,000 in match.
Okay, so you probably can do a little over 100 properties maybe?
Yeah, we've got currently on our list, I wanna say like 65, maybe around there,
Around 50.
around 50 individual lots, and then I think a handful of common areas as well.
And the project budget came out to be acreage based, and I believe Spencer allocated about 3,500 per acre, which is how we got to that number.
Yeah.
Some of the lots are bigger.
Right.
Yeah, so the lots are bigger, we also tend to factor in like buffer room, shoot high, you know, just in case we do end up getting like really great cost, or if we go into a crisis and contractors are all charging crazy amounts, you know, so. But ideally, knowing this terrain, and he's seen these communities, and it's all very flat ground, it's not super steep in any area or super rocky in any areas. I mean, ideally, it should not surpass that amount per acre, so.
So for Gamble Oaks, we had 2 properties that were already assessed. We've got others who are interested, and we'd like to add some common area. How do we do that?
That's gonna come, so this is the slide where I mentioned what we're prioritizing right now, or first, is gonna be what we use to craft the grant. So the 9 common parcels that were included from HOAs or just communities, and then the individual landowner lots that were indicated to us on that final sign-up list. So that's kind of what we wrote our grant based on and based around. That's how we got to our acreage figure of between 330 and 335 acres. Was by gauged interest, and the parcels that were included are worked into that figure. So it's gonna come down to whether or not we have any remaining budget left over to add in any kind of common areas, or other landowner lots. I will say it's typical, it probably will happen. I've already had 2 people, say that either they're moving or they are just not interested anymore. I mean, that's 2 lots freed up right there, you know, so things happen, people drop out, or people, you know, things come up. And so as that happens, we can work some new people in, or maybe new common areas. But ideally, we're gonna start with that main list of people and common areas that we were given for the grant application. It'll depend on acreage as well. Is it like really large? Sorry, yeah, it's a big common area, like 30
Well, it's 100
acres,
acres.
100 acres,
But
okay.
we would obviously prioritize part of that.
Yeah, the most severe
Closest.
areas, okay,
We have someone that needs to go.
okay.
And how do I schedule my assessment since I'm not there in person?
So we can send out our, time slots for each neighborhood. Can they maybe just let us know which neighborhood they're in?
Sure, I will.
And we have a sign-in sheet. Did you guys pass the sign-in sheet on the way?
We did.
Oh,
We
it's
did.
in the time, sweet, okay, cool.
Uh,
Okay, yeah, the Pines, we're looking at, I think, later dates. So it would likely be between the 2nd and 3rd week in April that we'd be reaching out to people in the Pines to go ahead and get these assessments completed. So my email address is gonna be at the end of this presentation. And if they wanna reach out directly, they can definitely do that, and I could let them know the dates that we have on the calendar for that community. And will be anyone, I mean, obviously, a lot of the people that have expressed interest are not here tonight, you know, so we'll be reaching out as well with follow-up to get people scheduled that weren't able to select a date tonight. So just maybe let them know, Kara, that we'll be following up after this.
And I'm gonna get all their addresses and put them on here for the people that are on.
Okay, perfect. All right. And then, yeah, we've come to our questions section, so if anybody has any questions that we have not answered yet, please feel free to throw them out. This is a great time to do so, yes.
So on the open space, the common area, if you have 2 or 3 different tracts or different areas, would it be beneficial that when you did your assessment, that you would assess 2 or 3 or whatever they are, you do the assessment up front? But if we didn't want the work done, you know, just because of collecting funds from the homeowners who pay right away. Can you then, as a group, decide that
Not to.
we can do this track
Yes.
this time, but maybe, you know, next year or sometime we can do that as long as it falls within the grant period.
Yeah, definitely. If you end up, and that's why we said we'll work with you guys and with the HOA common areas that are larger, and especially like that one being 100 acres and prioritizing, you know, different sections. What we sometimes do in those larger scale treatments is increments. So once the contractor finishes the first, like, if we say 5, or if we say 10 acres of that parcel, then they'll invoice for the first 10 acres. And then you'd get reimbursed for that, and then, you know, they keep moving on. But they can invoice you in increments, that makes it a bit easier, or yes, in some cases, we do split up HOA work across a couple of years if necessary.
And the $93 assessment for you to come out, mark and work, that would be per track, right?
Yes,
Per part, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
of course. Yes.
So when they estimate for you guys, it's the per acre type number.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if we don't have an acre of
Right.
land and that type of thing.
Right.
And we have, larger tree in the front yard that we might possibly take down, it will, it'd be a price, hey, this is your acre pricing. And then we're gonna add this tree on that you would like to take off that's close to the house. And then they combine those prices, is that how that?
Yeah, yeah,
So
pretty much.
they'll prorate the per acre cost to whatever portion of acre that you have in your lot, and then, yeah, they'll give you probably an itemized bid for the tree removal. If they have to subcontract, they can probably give you that amount.
Okay, so if we're on a quarter acre, then they would say, hey, the price is this much, we're gonna bump it down to.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
They won't charge you for a full acre.
Yeah.
And I remember you guys' house, you've got all the deer hanging out underneath the porch.
We got,
We took all of those.
Oh, they're out.
Out.
Okay.
They're out.
Yes, those junipers were a bit scary, but I do remember that tree. It is definitely one that would need an arborist, so
yeah,
it is likely that they would subcontract that, and so they would give you that cost, and that would be worked into your bid. But yeah, they won't overcharge if you don't have an acre, and that's why I wanted to throw out, if there's properties that good work can still be done on, and it just isn't an acre of property, that's okay. We're talking more so, for people that have like 5 acres
Sure.
of land, and they're like, I want you to remove this one bush. Like, it's not gonna fly, we're gonna require an acre treatment on those larger lots.
Oh.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Thank you.
yes,
Yeah, I just wanna also remind everybody that I still do believe that, if you do mitigation on your property, the extra 50% that you did not get reimbursed can be written off through your taxes.
Only if it's under 2,500.
Right,
Max is 2,500.
but that still could be 2,500 that can be written off on your tax returns for next year. So
That's
so
not.
yes, so you can get some of that reimbursed.
okay.
And I believe that program, I think it was like a 5-year.
Extended it.
And they extended it, okay, I just wasn't sure, I didn't know when it would sunset, but you can as homeowners write that portion off as well on your taxes that you had to pay.
State or federal?
Just
State.
State only.
Mhm.
And I've got another question, like when you assessed our trees, they're in like, we're on Bonnie Ridge Drive and it keeps getting wider and wider, like. Easement, and the easement, how do we determine, because those are in our easement, the trees that are marked, I'm like, do I pay for that, or what, I don't know what my easement is anymore.
So we could come out, and we should have had the property boundary, on our events and that.
Yeah, we have the property boundaries.
We should have been working just on the property. If maybe it was for the educational day.
It could have been for that
It
too.
may have been on the easement, yeah.
Yeah, cause they're all blue ribbon tight, so I was like, are those mine though?
Yeah, we could always unmark them if they end up not being on your property and the HOA, doesn't wanna cover them. Usually easements, I think, are HOA owned. So.
Well, there's counties.
There's counties.
Oh, counties as well.
Yeah.
And don't let the county do that. That's kind of their responsibility.
Yeah,
They don't ever do it, unfortunately.
Okay, talk to Spencer, and maybe next year, he would love to start working with Elbert County, especially Public Works. And so we may be looking at a future grant with Public Works to do this same type of easement type of stuff. So this is not going to be the last grant that we do out here. So don't think this is gonna be a one and done. We are hoping to work with our Colorado State Forest Service partners and try and apply to, especially if we get a lot of people interested that were not interested in the beginning.
Right.
We're gonna keep moving forward with this and we wanna keep going. We're really excited to partner with them and have this opportunity for our communities. So people weren't totally in the beginning, or we have more space than open space that we want to get. we're gonna have future ones. We're not just stopping with this, so.
The Fur Run grant, like I said, it's state funded grant, so it wouldn't be, going away anytime soon, and it's an annual grant as well. So we can, write applications every year. Obviously, there's timelines on them. So this grant funding that we have, we've got about, I think it is 2 years, usually to spend out that money. So over the next 2 years, we'll be trying to spend out that full $582,000.
Well, I'll help you.
We're all going to get some food after this done. I don't care. But yeah, we will be, and that's why I said too, we write in a buffer, figure into these grant applications in case the cost is high. If it comes back that it's a really competitive bid process, we get a really great contractor in place that's, gonna do it for less than the cost we had built into our budget for that acreage, then that's where the chances come to add on more lots or add on common areas, or things like that, so.
So how should, because people will ask me, how can I, if I haven't already been involved, how can I,
get involved,
how can I sign up in
Okay.
case there's extra money?
Well, have them reach out to me, and
Okay.
the next slide here, has contact info. I thought I threw yours on there too, Mark.
Oh, it's-
Love Mark as well, please.
But they can also, so what we did was, we had, after we won this grant, we put it out. We had a lot of people started calling us and go, hey, wait a minute, how do we get in on this now? And so I had Ryan change our sign up on our website to say, if you didn't make it into the first, but you still wanna be a part of this at a later time, they can go to our website, and we're gonna keep a list going so that if by the end or we get close to our end of the funding and we haven't used it all, we can open it up to those people as well. So I'd love to, if the HOA wants to get some extra land, shoot that to Ryan on that application on our website, the way you did the first time. And we will just make that running list, and that way, we wanna spend all the money. We wanna spend all the money,
Yes.
so
Turn it over.
yes.
Yeah, no, we
No.
don't ever wanna give money back. Spend it all.
Yes, so we are keeping a running list of people so that if people move out or change their mind or financially can't figure that out or can't do the work anymore, then we will start adding on some of those other people that have inquired about it.
And one thing to keep in mind, the new commissioner, Ron McDaniel, I have met with him, and his background has been with emergency management and mitigation. He is very, very interested in getting mitigation work for Elbert County,
Love that.
and he would love, I'm setting up a meeting for our HOA to go meet with him, but keep that in mind, because when I met with him at another meeting, and we were talking, he was very excited to hear about it.
Yeah, and the success of
That's
this,
the key, definitely, because if we have a commissioner behind us, then they're going to work with the directors at the department.
Yes, I mean, we would love to open this up to the county and do a big countywide. At the time, it was, and I know we were all working and trying to get this off the ground, and it was getting to be late in the game, and I'm like, Elizabeth Fire will become a fiscal agent, anybody in our district, we're just gonna do it this way. But we do hope to incorporate all of Elbert County and maybe the right of ways, and there's a lot of homes on 21 and down 1721, there's a lot of properties there that they own that they would like to get mitigated as well, so I'm excited for that.
Our neighborhood was kind of late to the game. We didn't find out about the grant until a few days before the application deadline. So we didn't get a lot of response, just because we didn't have time to get it out.
Okay.
So I know our neighborhood is in desperate need, and there's a lot of people who are interested. If they were to sign up now in weren't able to be part of the grant, would you keep that information to apply
Yes.
towards the next grant?
Yes,
Or would
absolutely.
they have to re-sign up?
No, we keep those lists, and that's actually our starting point for our next round of grants, would be to reference our list of interested landowners that maybe couldn't get treatment this go around, or just that were interested in having more treatment done if another grant came available later. So we retain that information, and we usually will start by reaching out and holding another informational meeting, maybe another kind of like educational day to kind of drum up that interest. So we would be reaching out to those people like first thing if we started to write a new grant application. So yeah, we would definitely, they don't have to re-sign up, and we would hold on to that information.
And what, you said you were kind of estimating around 3,500 per applicant. Is that just the 50%?
Well, that's per acre,
Per acre.
actually.
Per acre.
Yeah.
So if a person has 5 acres, it's just for a homeowner to guesstimate, you know, what they're looking at in price. They're looking at 3,500 times 5 and then divided, or is that just their part?
So it's gonna, I mean, it'll depend on the property, right? But say if they do have a really difficult property, it's on the higher end, and say our contractor comes back at that 3,500. So that would be if they treated all 5 acres at that 3,500, it's gonna be $17,500 out of pocket that they would pay to the contractor, and then they would get reimbursed the 50%, so $8,750 of that would come back to them.
And then do they have the ability at that time when they see the final invoice to say, I only want to do part of the work?
So they'll get a bid estimate from the contractor,
Okay.
and that's where they say, okay, if we treat what's laid out and what we talked about, it's gonna cost this amount. If they decide that that's too much, because they'll know the exact reimbursement amount they're getting back, then that can be adjusted, probably like one time. They won't start making multiple adjustments and keep like, you know, puzzle piecing it or changing it. But they will change it like one time if necessary. And so if they say, okay, well, we can't do 5, but we'll do 2 acres, then they can make that change and get to a new bid estimate, and then.
Something we'd like to know up front, because we can
Yes.
see the trees, so if you choose to dial it back, you'll have blue
You'll have,
trees.
yeah,
I guess I'm asking because the properties in our neighborhood are all 5+ acres.
Right,
And most of them are in desperate need, not all of them, but most of them do. So the landowner, before they would agree to it, would need kind of an idea of what they might want to do.
Yeah. And they would have that idea, and then, like we said, you have up until signing that service agreement to bow out. Even if we've come out, we've done the layout, we've done everything, if you just get that bid and you're like, no, or it just doesn't feel right, no, then you don't have to sign it, and then that'll just be that. Like Mark said, unfortunately, you'll have a lot of blue trees on your property. But no, there's nothing holding your feet to the fire until you sign that service agreement, and you won't sign it before seeing like the cost estimate, so they would have an idea.
No, I guess I was just thinking even ahead of time, like for a meeting, you know, your max, at the worst possible case, is probably going to be about this, so that you aren't getting people who are having you come out and then backing out. If they've got an idea in their head,
Right.
ahead of time.
Yeah, I would say 3,500 would be a good figure to lead with, cause that's like what we kind of
it's
built it
probably
around,
higher than what they'll get.
hopefully.
We're hoping that, but
Yeah.
you know, then there's other factors like arborists where it can be like $500 to $1,000 a tree.
I
Which
can
could-
see a lot of that too.
Mm, so Spencer like kind of made that estimate based on what he's seen in the area. That's kind of like the going price per acre for work in the area. So that's kind of based on historical data
Yeah.
from the market.
And 3,500 is that basically for someone who hasn't done any kind of work? Is that kind of what you're looking at? Hasn't done any
Like a
type of
full-
fire mitigation?
Yeah,
Yeah.
full operation,
He's
yeah.
like almost perfect.
Oh, yeah.
No, you guys' house was fantastic. We did an assessment and we were like, oh, yeah, I'm sure it's your house, like when I do mitigation meetings, I'm like, this is how your trees should. Yeah, it was great. We pulled up and you guys were hard at work. I mean, you were like taking pine needles out of the rocks. We're like, no, you don't even have to say anything. No, and we were like, this is like ideal. We got in the truck and we were like, gosh,
No
every
notes.
property was so good, yeah, for real. But yeah, no, that would be, yeah, for full, oh my gosh, I can't speak, I'm losing it, full operation, mechanical treatment, that would be the going rate. So, if you don't have a lot to be done, right, then it's probably going to be lower than that, because there's gonna be less work to be
You
done.
still wanna get those done, cause I didn't even dream of those trees that weren't gonna get,
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about
Right,
that,
right.
so, yeah, well, I didn't
Yeah.
know.
So there's definitely, benefit in it, but it will be less expensive, the less work they're having to do. A lot that comes into these costs, come down to terrain sometimes. If it's like really steep slopes and super rocky, it's like hard access, then that drives up costs from contractors. But you guys, these neighborhoods out here are all relatively flat topography. There's not a lot of rocky areas. It's very easily accessible. So that should help in getting, lower costs from contractors, because they like to see that. It makes their life easier, yeah.
Might give you a better bid.
Yeah. All right, well, if that's everything, then we really appreciate your time. We're gonna be, this was recorded, so I think that we'll probably send that recording out to everybody. If you didn't grab the sign-in sheet on your way in, I would ask that you please do that. And then if you'd like to come take a look at these sign-up lists for the HIC assessments, feel free to come do that. They're kind of separated out by target dates per neighborhood. If you already had your assessment, you're solid. You don't need to have another one. But yeah, we'll be out there soon enough.
Do you have any restrictions with the recording link? Can we put it on our website?
That would be a Kara question, for sure.
I'm fine with that, yes.
Hey, I just get my good side, don't I? Yeah.
I don't know, it's
If you stop the meetings.
Oh, we stopped the video. You need to stop sharing screen first. Just hover. Hover.
First year, I'm like.
Usually it pops up.
Take down your, no, it's like, I'm still done.
Oh, no, you're not switched.
Build up, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think the next year.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. If you stop recording, so I think it was under more.